Hi everyone, this is a video explainer on advanced chords, augmented and diminished triads. This is going to be the next unit that we're covering in our music theory. We've spoken about augmented and diminished triads previously, but that was more in regard to being able to identify them when we hear them. So if you hear a chord, being able to identify whether it's augmented or diminished. In this case, we're going to look at identifying them when we see them on notation, so when we see them on the music. Before we go any further, it is really important that when we do this, that you know all of your major and minor chords off by heart. If you don't, you're going to find this really difficult. If you are not in a position where you have that sorted out yet, then you must make that start to happen now for the final exam. So use the flashcards that we made up in class. If you don't have them, come and speak to me when I'm back in school so we can get them sorted out for you, because it's really important that you start making that happen. For the purposes of this exercise that we're doing today, I think you've got some of the chords written in your jotter. If you need to look them up online or ask someone else in the class, just do that to do this exercise, but you're going to have to find a way to learn them off by heart in the long term. So we need to address that if you haven't done so already. Anyway, moving on to today's task, we're going to start with augmented triads, okay? So remember, a triad is just a chord that is made up of 3 notes. And an augmented triad is simply a major chord, except they take the 5th of the chord and they sharpen it. They make it sharp, all right? So when you're writing out the names of the chords, just like you would have, C major or C minor, when it comes to diminished and augmented, if you're writing the name of the chord, it would be C augmented would be C. You could write C augmented or you could write C aug. If you're writing diminished, you could write C dim. Likewise, it was G augmented would be G aug. G diminished would be G dim, so on, so on. Okay. So if we look on the right here, this is an example of an augmented chord, and in this case, this is C augmented. So I'm just going to write C aug. And to work out that that's C aug, like I was saying before, you need to know your major and minor triads. Obviously, over on the left here, if we look at it, just remind ourselves what a C major chord is. We've got C, E, and G. C is the first, E is the third, G is the fifth. Looking at this chord, we've got C, E, and then our G sharp. So we can see here that is basically a C major chord, C, E, G, except the 5th has been sharpened. Major chord, sharpened, is an augmented chord. So that chord is C augmented. Moving on to diminished triads. Diminished triads are based on the minor chord, so it's a minor chord, and then the 5th is flattened. Okay, so this over here is a C diminished chord. So it's C dim. And just to show you how that works is if we look over on the left, again, we've got our C minor chord. So that's C, E flat, and G. C is the first, E flat's the third, G is the fifth. And if we look at our C diminished chord, you can see we have our C, our E flat, and then we've got our G. So that's our C minor chord, except the G is flattened. So that makes it a diminished chord. Okay. So that's our C diminished. So what you now have to do is go to the tab on this section, it should be, and go to Advanced Chords 1 Exercises, and you're going to complete tasks 1 and 2. And in both tasks, all you need to do is name the chord. So obviously you're going to have the root of the chord, so let's just say it's E, and then you're going to decide whether it's E augmented, or is it E diminished, or is it D augmented, so on, so on. You have to name the chord. Just write your answers underneath each chord. So for the first one, we're going to have the triads nicely stacked on top of each other. So this is an example of what you'll be given, something like this. So all we need to do is basically name our notes and then work out whether it's a diminished or augmented chord. All of these are going to be augmented or diminished. I'm not going to give you any major or minor or anything like that, okay? So, first thing, step one, let's name our notes. So, remember when we do this, we need to keep an eye out, just whenever we name any notes, keep an eye out for the key signature, yeah? Because that's going to affect there. So, we're in G major here, so that means the Fs are all sharp. So, if there's any Fs, they're going to be sharp, all right? So, let's have a look. So, our notes are D. Then we've got an F, but remember, because of our key signature, that's going to be F sharp. And then we've got an A with a sharp next to it, so an A sharp. Now, I know that D, F sharp, and A would be D major, but in this case, the fifth has been sharpened. So it's a major chord, the fifth's been sharpened, so that's an augmented chord. So that is going to be D augmented, okay? Now, when you come to task 2, it's going to be a bit more complicated. This time, instead of having the triad laid with the first, third, and fifth on top of each other in root position, we're actually going to mess around with the voicing of the chords. So that means that the chords might be inverted, so it might have the third or the fifth in the bass. It also might mean that the notes above the bass note might be in a different order as well, just because you can do that basically to make the chord sound different ways. So for instance, let's take this as an example, this one here. This is again either a diminished or augmented triad, but as you can see, the notes aren't just nicely on top of each other. So what we're going to have to do in this case is first of all work out our triad, then work out whether it's augmented or diminished. So what I would do first of all, if I was in your shoes, I would work out the 3 notes. You can actually just ignore the accidentals as well at the moment and just write down the 3 notes. So let's get these. The first one here, that is an F. So we've got an F. Then this one is a C. And then I would keep them jumbled up as well. Like, not jumbled up, but like kind of write them separately so you can put them together in a minute. And then if we go into the bass clef, this is the A. Okay, so I've got F, C, and A, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically, like an anagram, kind of move them around and find the triad. So I can see that the triad here is going to be F, A, and C. It's an F triad, okay? Now that I've done that, I've worked out my triad, I'm going to add in the accidental. So remember, you need to consider the key signature here as well. So we have, if I take this bottom note, that's an A, no accidental, so that's fine. This C here is actually a C sharp, so that's going to be a C sharp. And then the F up the top here is fine. So that's our chord there, F, A, C sharp. So that is an F major chord with a sharpened fifth. So that is an F augmented, okay? And if you're actually to look at this chord, if you're going into more detail, if we look at the actual chord, if we look at the actual chord here, that would actually be an F augmented, and it's actually a first inversion because the bass note is the A, which is the third. So that's the first inversion. But don't worry about writing the inversion just now. Just write down whether it's, you know, the root note and the augmented or diminished. Okay, hope that's challenging enough for you and hope you get on with it okay. And I'll see you when I'm back next week. Ta-da!